Welcome back to part 3 of my series where I express the structure and purpose of various parts of democracy. In part 1 I gave you some indication to the fact that in a democracy, even though in principle the will of the people is supposed to decide, you're encouraged by the system to only consider that one side is supposed to win. In part 2 I presented how the power structure itself has its own ambitions and interests, and how it uses certain techniques to get what it wants. And today I will present to you the ultimate form in which the power manipulation takes place, why the side that is supposed to lose, the right, is supposed to lose, and why the side that is supposed to win, the left, is supposed to win, the way that we're most likely to solve this, and the role you could play in making things better. So if you'd want to watch part 1 and 2 of this series, which paradoxically at the time of recording are both my most popular video and my least popular video, and I welcome you to this Lessons in Political Maturity special. Democracy is a joke, so how do we fix it? We've seen in part 2 that lies, even lies with statistics, can be used to justify some democratic political actions or ideas. When these are challenged, they immediately find their defenders. For example, now, when Trump and Musk are doing an audit of the US government and try to find out where their money is going, and then they find numbers which don't add up, you have defenders of the system saying things such as the following.
Nobody who was 150 years old, or 200 years old, or 300 years old is receiving Social Security checks.
Yes, we know that no one who is 200 or 300 years old is getting paid, but someone is. There are people who are getting so absorbed in condemning the wrong party that they do not notice what they are defending by omission. Take also this for example. A lot of chickens were killed in the past few years because of some disease during the Biden administration, and egg prices went a little bit up. Trump promised to get them down, the prices are coming down, but politicians react like this.
When I win, I will immediately bring prices down starting on day one.
Now the part which always gets me is how all their backgrounds become the same footage of riots which has nothing to do with what they're discussing, and they're just throwing everything at the board until something sticks. What he said in his Congress speech, which I forgot to cover last time, is true.
This is my 5th such speech to Congress. And once again, I look at the Democrats in front of me and I realize there is absolutely nothing I can say to make them happy, or to make them stand or smile or applaud. Nothing I can do. I could find a cure to the most devastating disease, a disease that would wipe out entire nations, or announce the answers to the greatest economy in history, or the stoppage of crime to the lowest levels ever recorded. And these people sitting right here will not clap, will not stand, and certainly will not cheer for these astronomical achievements. They won't do it, no matter what. Five times I've been up here. It's very sad.
This is further exemplification of what I began presenting in part 1. Conservatives and right-wingers can and will accept losses. Leftists, on the other hand, believe that only they should win. The party who wins is the not right-wing party. Whatever happens, wherever the election, they're allegedly the party of progress, or their actions, I'm told, must be good. According to these establishment, democratic parties, if the right wing ever wins and can do anything, if, for example, there ever is a year where there are more recent immigrants deported than new ones came into the country, that's basically a guarantee for another We brought in more migrants to help the economy and the pensions and the healthcare systems. No! Ignore those statistics showing that migrants have higher unemployment, lower contribution to the tax fund, and higher criminality. Ignore the scandals of migrant origin. If you ever notice any disparity or any pattern, then what we need to deal with first is not the crime itself, but you for noticing it. Now obviously this thing happens because it's easier to manage a problem than to solve it. Because if you prioritize solving the problem, then some very uncomfortable questions will be asked about the people who are in charge of the situation and let the problem continue. I will cover some of that when time comes in future videos if you're interested. The point for now is that you're not allowed to know things like this. Those are hate facts, and you should shut up and accept that fighting racism is more important than having a country. This double standard, especially of people who are part of a demographic get penalized, but people who are not get rewarded, is part of a larger process which I wanted to address this video called Anarcho-Tyranny. You, as the constituent, are kept in a state of confusion, the anarcho component, so that the state can consolidate its power, the tyranny component. I will address this process again on several occasions on my channel. But why does it happen? Because it keeps you disorganized, and you don't notice that the establishment are nothing and at worst actively create problems or let problems happen for long enough as to come back later to fix the problem that they let spread. They get to frame themselves as the solution to the problem when the problem wouldn't have gotten this bad without their previous actions. Sounds familiar?
And then let me just say finally, as somebody who's of an ethnic minority background myself, I do not stand for any differential treatment before the law for anyone of any kind, and there will never be a two-tier sentencing approach under my watch or under this Labour government.
Well, Robert Jenrick on Twitter had a reply to that. Under two-tier care, that's exactly what is happening, though. It's outrageous. This would be enshrined an anti-white and anti-Christian bias in our criminal justice system, and as you can see in the screenshot, a pre-sentencing report will normally be considered necessary if the offender belongs to one or more of the following cohorts. And some may or may not be reasonable, such as it's your first custodial sentence, or you're a pregnant or postnatal woman. That could make sense for avoiding jail time, obviously for the good of the child. Or there are people, obviously, who depend on you. Some of that may make some sense. Those that definitely don't make sense, if you are female, or if you are from an ethnic minority, cultural minority, and or faith minority community. In other words, if you are a straight white male, the sentencing guidelines say that you will not necessarily be entitled to a pre-sentence report, which effectively is a report that is written and can be pivotal in helping the court decide exactly what the sentencing should be. And effectively they are written to help custodial sentences be reduced or be changed to a suspended sentence, say. So this is a pretty direct two-tier justice system where if you are convicted of a crime, when it comes to sentencing, you have a direct advantage, directly stated in the sentencing guidelines, that if you are some sort of minority or a woman, because women aren't minorities, then you have a direct advantage in having justice served upon you with a much lighter hand.
And speaking of the establishment and its actions, together with keeping you in this puppet game of moral panic, you also have protests which, besides doing nothing, they appear out of nowhere, disappear into nowhere, with sometimes the plans for the counter-protests being made before those protests, and nobody knows how they happened or what they did besides sloganeering. Yes, I do have a specific protest in mind, but that's because I paid more attention to it. These are tactics which have been developed and refined over time, and they keep re-emerging with increasing frequency. The idea that at any point last year the UK and Starmer's government lost control of the streets to protesters is absurd. Protests at best prove themselves to be a way to signal who's against the government, and the government will notice.
An Afghan migrant drove a car into a left-wing protest in Munich. And how did leftists in Germany react? By hitting the streets of Munich to protest against the far right. Naturally, upsetting details emerging of 28 injured in Munich attack by 24-year-old Afghan asylum seeker. Germany really needs to get a grip with its increasing demonisation of Muslims, ethnic minorities and migrants. What? Alright, yet again, who's got the Norm Macdonald meme?
And even if the protesters will not sabotage their own position by this, in Anarcho-Tyranny, the ruling structure knows how to reframe its position so that it's something good. Imagine you had a normal person in the population and an evil person representing anarcho-tyranny. Let's take a cause which may concern the population itself. For example, demographic decline.
Alright, so I just press this button. Okay. And action.
You could have the evil person say something on the lines of, "The reason our birth rate declined is because our economy is too weak, and we don't have the numbers necessary to fuel our pension and welfare states. So nobody wants to have kids. And as such, I believe that the solution would be to import over 1 million immigrants per year to deal with this problem.
Can we cut? Just real quick. I have 12 questions. Question 1. Can you repeat what you just said?
Nobody wants to have kids. And as such, I believe that the solution would be to import over 1 million immigrants per year.
Yeah, I thought those were the words you said in that order. Okay. Of all the sentences you could say, why say that one? 'Cause what in the red flag does that mean? You know? And then you said it would be for
1 million immigrants per year.
Yeah, I thought it was that number. Okay, come on. Let's try to get one normal sentence.
An aging population needs young migrants to support it. Migrants will do the jobs that the locals won't, and migrants contribute to the economy more than they take. We are all global citizens, and all nations belong to everyone because migration is a human right and no one is illegal. And opposing migration and a world without borders makes you on the wrong side of history, and you should overcome your xenophobic hatred because borders are just lines on a map and they stand against our shared values. We must remember that multiculturalism fuels progress and diversity is our strength. The world we're building will move away from archaic notions of nationalism and peoplehood stuck in the past. Progress is inevitable, beneficial, necessary, and has been decided already. Monocultures are a form of stagnation. Diversity drives innovation, and with homogeneity, the overrepresentation of one group may lead to systemic biases and supremacist attitudes, including conspiracy theories about replacement, which must be opposed on every turn because they stand in the way of equality, equity, and fairness. Online platforms and governments must do more to combat these dangerous narratives and others. Hate has no place in a just society, and we must be proactive in stopping harmful speech. Hate speech is not free speech, and we should all know that free speech has its limits to preserve civic discourse, and we cannot say the request of having basic human decency is censorship. Only a tolerant society can be truly free, and keeping a watchful eye on dangerous activity is a necessary part of the modern world. We need more transparency to fight crime and corruption, and that is why we need a digital ID to track individuals which pose a danger to public safety. With a digital ID, you will have a safer, more convenient life, because you will not need to worry about the harassment of others, and you can use it for easy, cashless transactions, which ties your digital ID to your bank account. Paper currency is detrimental to sustainability, and we should all work for a world without paperwork, bureaucracy, and outdated systems. It is our world, and in it, digital identity is a human right, ensuring a safer, faster, and more inclusive identification. To resist this is to resist progress, and to resist demographic change is uninclusive and simply not sustainable. Nations have always changed. Nothing is permanent.
Question 3. What does
To resist this is to resist progress, and to resist demographic change is uninclusive and simply not sustainable.
mean? Did he? Can't be worse than what I'm thinking. Ease my mind. Question 4. Why are we in the woods? And same goes for questions 4 through 12.
I hope this brief presentation of the globalist mindset will give you an idea of how it tries to reframe every issue into something desirable, which simultaneously is something which gives it more power and you less. You can organize, of course, and the government will notice. But again, the idea that it will take action because of a couple dozen demonstrators is false. It's pretty much all Astro-Turfing. On the one hand is the Astro-Turfing of the activists who, as we've discussed, are not infrequently clueless about the extent of the cause they're fighting against. In addition to that, the causes themselves prove themselves to be funded opposition. When the funding runs out, the figures who supported them abandon them just as easily. To be perfectly clear, we are primarily talking about left-wing activists here. They, alongside with violent demonstrators or movements known primarily for violence on the right, are the kinds of opposition which Anarcho-Tyranny prefers. They're both splendid tools of turning political energy and frustrations into division, infighting and exhaustion. How does this happen and why is the left such a good tool for it? Imagine you want to organize for a cause, but once you do, you realize that the other supporters, the people with which you have to deal with regularly, either believe nonsensical things or have their actions coordinated in such a way in which they would result in your ritual humiliation. As such, even if the movement achieves its goals, it will be against your interests. And the more leftist a movement is, the more self-sabotaging it is. If you don't believe me, think of the following. Which do you think is more easy? To make a demand for one thing, or to make a demand for multiple things at once? Which do you think will be easier to get accepted? And once accepted, which do you think will be more capable of directing its resources to its desired cause at maximum levels? Well, in here is where intersectionality comes. If you have a movement, any movement, let's say for labor, and using intersectionality, if the cause initially did not include race, it will now include race. If the cause initially did not include sexuality, it will include sexuality. If the cause did not include environmentalism, it will include environmentalism.
There's a significant difference. Like, I would even call it a distance in work ethic between baby boomers and Gen X, and then between Gen X and millennials, and then again between millennials and Zoomers. And you have people from each generation that are abnormal. So they either have a far better work ethic or a far worse work ethic. So they may be like as if they were in the generation before theirs or the generation after theirs. But it's pretty consistent that each generation, when they start a job, they are not doing the work that the generation before them did. And they don't necessarily understand how. You see that a lot with this intergenerational difference, and it varies in how bad it is, but it's a big, it causes quite a bit, I should say, of frustration between coworkers and between managers and coworkers. And then as that's going on, you also have this DEI thing happening where if an individual is being dumped on, like a coworker is dumping their work on another coworker, and everybody knows it's happening. The complaint cannot be made. The manager cannot do the criticism. The coworker cannot be guided to do their job if they're female, if they're minority, if there's some combination thereof, if they got a special religion, if they make a big deal about being LGBTQ, if they make a big deal about being atheist. Any of that. It's like, oh, you're only picking on me because demographic, and it has nothing to do with the fact that I've done no tasks for the last 2 weeks and my coworker is complaining about it. And it's being upheld by human resources. So managers are getting disciplined for telling people to do their jobs, and colleagues are getting disciplined for expecting to not have to do their coworkers' jobs. And that dynamic between generations and between demographics and everything, it's making it to the point where managers are starting to look at people when they're trying to hire as, is this going to be somebody that I can mentor, or am I going to get in trouble for mentoring this person? Does this person seem to be coming in with already some knowledge of the job? How much training do they need? Or am I going to be able to coast and this person's going to come in and do the work? And I've seen that for the last that last 15 years in the various places that I've worked. And it hasn't just been like the low rung retail and stuff like it. I've seen that as a college professor. I've seen that in journalism. I've seen that in retail. I've seen it in healthcare. It's everywhere.
This means you will either have to negotiate for a higher amount to achieve a meaningful payment level in all of the causes, or you will have to divide the same amount into more causes. On top of this, what if activists in the movement believe stupid things on a regular level, or are genuinely unpleasant? Earlier in this series, I gave examples of how the activists themselves act as if the reactions to attacks from them are in fact unprovoked attacks against them. I didn't give any video examples previously, but pay attention to this.
Specifically mentions a dismantling of any effort to stop bullying LGBTQ people.
What am I supposed to say? That's not what it says. It says the bullying LGBTQ agenda. It's talking about browbeating people into accepting LGBTQ plus people, which I would like it if people did accept LGBTQ plus people. But at the same time, they're not saying bullying people. Like, can you not read? This isn't about bullying LGBTQ people. It's about the LGBTQ agenda, which they are referring to as bullying. Bullying as a... what adjective? Is that an adjective? It is now, I don't know. As opposed to the verb, bullying, to bully.
Think about organizing with people which have these tendencies. You, as the other participant, which is not part of this activist group, will always spend more time with the activists than with the people you're demanding things from. And it will be more immediately meaningful to correct the activists than to let them continue, possibly towards failed goals. And the more leftist activism continues, it becomes more disruptive. It began with the very concept of revolution, and members in academia which supported describe it as a virus. The new notions which come out of it then are notions like queerness. And what is queerness? Put simply, queerness is the attitude of hating society because your expression is not seen as normal. This hatred that you have then motivates you to change your behavior even more in ways which spite society, which then distances you even more from the normal, which motivates you to spite society more. Because this is the cycle, the more people are in queer spaces, the more they resemble the same pathway, and they begin to look exactly like each other because they're breaking the same norms, so they will end up with the same form. And as we know, being identically spiteful with each other is exactly how you become more unique. These attitudes, however, are not sustainable, and as you can see, they themselves are funded by things like USAID. And once this funding is removed, many of these leftist movements just evaporate. The people who supported them distance themselves from it. I told you that these activists believe things which create conflict with outsiders by like promoting stupid beliefs or contribute to some sort of self-serving ritual humiliation. Take a look to examples like this.
You're making it sound like a 9-year-old walks into a doctor's office and says, "Give me some testosterone." And the doctor goes, "Oh, thank God, because we're wanting to create an army of transgenders."
Now, we passed a law to protect the children in Arkansas, and I think that's what is important.
Again, the medical community disagrees with you that
Well,
that's
not all of the
protecting
medical
children.
community.
Who doesn't?
Several months later.
Do I think in most of America they did that in schools? I don't. But I think in enough of them, in enough far left places, they did constantly have this idea in the minds of children that maybe you're not in the right body. I mean, the New England Journal of Medicine advocated for taking sex off of a birth certificate, I believe. It was like you're assigned sex at
assigned sex at birth. Yeah.
You're assigned.
I think that's right.
I was assigned it by my when I was born. Yes, and again, to tell kids it doesn't always have to be and isn't always the default setting, but that's a different mentality than they put in the minds of kids. And that's why this debate goes on. And the fact that you think, or a lot of people on the left think that even if you just have this debate, it makes you a bigot. You just have to roll over. That was, you asked about the Biden administration. That was their position.
Or this.
I don't base my understanding of civil society on religion. And so we have a civil society. Okay. We have laws that we have decided as a society in a democratic way. And for some people, it's okay for it to be informed by their religion. That's okay.
Okay, perfect. So if tomorrow society comes together and we say, hey, trans folks don't deserve rights, you would be okay with that?
No, I would be against it.
Family.
So do you have a problem with gay people being married?
It's not that I have a problem. I just don't see a justification for why they ought to be gay outside of it just feels good. Can you give me another justification for it?
Well, I think maybe that's the way they were born.
Okay, what about pedophiles? Are they born that way?
They may be, yeah.
Okay, so should we let a pedophile off the hook since they were born that way?
No, I think we as a society has decided...
Should implement duties to prevent them from acting on that innate urge, correct?
Call an ambulance! Call an ambulance! But not for me.
Or this.
Now, while you're writing, jot this down. They're also cutting $230 billion from the Committee of Agriculture. Now, I know a lot of people, when they hear agriculture, they think farming and, cows and things of that nature. And it does include that. But it also overwhelmingly includes food assistance programs like SNAP and WIC. And despite the myth of the black welfare queen that America likes to peddle, white people are the largest recipient population of SNAP. And it's by a lot. You girls use food stamps like it's no tomorrow. White people account for 44.6% of the adult users compared to black and Hispanic people's 27%, according to Pew Research via the U.S. Census.
Or this.
Can women be towards men, to which Ivy, you disagree?
Yeah.
Why is that?
Unless you're in a position of power, or you have a hegemonic status, or you have some influence to inflict to influence another social group or another group below you or something, then you can't really be ist towards them, whether it's race-ist or sexist. So in our society, we could say the cisgender male would be someone that has a higher social, in society, they have more power. And so as a result, then they would be able to be racist. And as humans, we basically just need like I said, money, food, shelter. So if a woman cannot get a job based on this stereotype or this prejudice, then that actually affects her ability to access those necessities.
If
Whereas
men
a
can't
man
get access to their kids because they're only viewed as being workhorses and not as being paternal, then that would negatively affect men. And that is what is currently happening, yeah?
Yes. And I believe
then how's that not?
And I'm not saying that's a bad I guess so. I guess I can concede to that. Yeah, it is. Yeah, because it's you did it. Yeah.
Or this.
Just to explain something, you're appearing on a show called Piers Morgan Uncensored. That means you can say whatever you want.
I know all about you, Piers.
Okay, you can think.
And I know how you're good at race baiting. I know how you're good at being transphobic.
Yes. A few minutes later.
You've called me a race baiter. You've called me Please stop talking. You've called me a race baiter.
Allegedly.
Hang on.
Alleged race
Hang on. But let's be clear. As you're doing now, the race baiting came from Cheryl Underwood to Sharon Osbourne, and it's now coming from you. So now you can respond.
Cannot be racist, Piers.
Now you can
Black
respond.
Women cannot be racist to white women. Are you kidding me?
Sorry?
That makes no sense.
Sorry?
Or this.
But the fact that in general, I sometimes make little digs at white people and or men. And just to, give some context, what these jokes usually are me pointing out a racialized or gendered social phenomenon that is harmful, but in a humorous way. And my response was basically, I don't care. I'm not interested in centering the feelings of white guys. The first way people responded was basically saying, what if someone used the rationale you're using here, but for jokes about black people or jokes about women or jokes about whatever other group? And I can barely dignify that argument with a response. That is a bad argument because it is simply not the same thing to make a joke about people of a hegemonic identity as it is to make a joke about people of a minoritized identity. Those are just not equivalent.
Now, I absolutely love logic like this.
Finally, what I think was the most compelling pushback I got on these jokes was people saying, okay, it's not the worst thing in the world that you make little jokes about white guys, but it does hurt, even if it's just a little bit. And if it hurts and you know that, why would you do it? Like, how hard is it to just not do it? And I think this sounds compelling if you don't understand what the value of these jokes are. There is value in people with minoritized identities talking shit amongst one another about the people who make their lives difficult. When I make a joke about a thing men often do, women feel validated because I am seeing their experience of pain, right? I'm allowed to prioritize the catharsis of minoritized people over the emotional comfort of white guys.
This is exactly what they use against other people when they want to be prioritized. But when it's about other groups, it's rather ironic that they don't have the same principled approach.
Well, I was going to say, it's not irony, it's hypocrisy, and it's not hypocrisy, it's hierarchy. Women are better than men, non-white people are better than white people, and because we believe that, we're better than you. And it's not just a lack of self-awareness, it's straight up deception. They know they're lying, but they're allowed to lie to you because they are above you in the hierarchy. They just don't call it lying when they do it. And they will force you to submit to the lie, just to humiliate you.
Fair enough. Every branch veering towards leftism has this aspect of it, that it will indulge the most negative parts of it for the sake of justifying more power to themselves. This is most clearly seen in anything which relates to pornography or OnlyFans or anything of the sort. In these spaces, the women, which are in the majority of cases unsuccessful, use the fact that they are paid as fuel for hatred against their own supporters.
So I feel like this is perfect for me. So I am a top OnlyFans creator, and I'm also a lawyer, which is a very weird,
You're a perfect person to
I'm a perfect person to talk about this. And I have a lot of, a lot of money from doing OnlyFans, but I was always also I've never been more vilified either for using my sexual capital in order to make a living.
And every branch of the leftist movement works like this. The socialist part hate the rich more than they support the poor. The race-related part supporting reparations just hate whites. Everything relating to gender tries to ask, how can we blame more problems on men and demand more from them?
Any woman that seeks validation or acceptance from a man and in the process puts down the next woman.
That's a qualifier. That's not what I asked you. I asked you if any woman wants validation from a man, does that make her a pick-me? I'm not asking for qualifiers. Answer that question.
So any woman that wants
validation from a man, does that make her a pick-me?
Yes.
Well, then if that's the case, then every girl who wants validation from her father is a pick-me.
So I think it's just really cute how we were both able to inspire this experience within one another. In my opinion, that's just the best case scenario of critical exchange, right? Everybody comes out of it reflecting upon themselves and evolving in some way and learning from the other. And moving through that defensiveness with curiosity and openness rather than pushing it away, right?
Except when it's people with power. When you're critical of people with power, we never have to be introspective because who cares? They have power, we don't. So let's make our politics by having them be against power. I'm a totally sane and well-functioning individual. And as I've said, with progressivism and with intersectionality, you have groups you are trained to pre-think of as having power, which justifies you taking power away from them and mistreating them, even when the legislation was changed so that those groups either no longer have the power advantage or are actually forced by legislation in a less favorable, less powerful position than the minoritized identities. If this criticism is rather harsh, if leftists didn't want me to criticize every part of the leftist movement, maybe they should have started with not making every part of the leftist movement be part of the problem. And if you still somehow don't believe me that the activists in these movements are genuinely clueless about the causes they support and the extent to which they should act, Let me give you one more example. The worst case of activists manufacturing outrage is in the trans movement. There's quite a substantial number of them which believe that everyone is out to get them and are about to be physically eliminated.
For those of you who have followed my channel for a while, you'll know that I have a video called There Are 10 Steps to Genocide. I want to make the case today that I think we've actually gone through every single step. There are, in 2025, 687 anti-trans bills active in every single state. You do not enact 687 bills in 49 states unless there is a well-organized and concerted effort against a group of people.
Dude, calm down. Do you know what 685, let's be generous and round it up to 700, do you know what 700 bills of legislation mean nationally in the US context? Do you know how many bills are passed annually? Roughly 70,000 on the low end. For each of the last 5 years, at least 70,000 and up to over 120,000 bills were passed nationally in the US. This means that these 700 trans bills represent roughly, though slightly less than, 1% of bills to address roughly, though slightly less than, 1% of the population. Does that put things into perspective a little bit? And as to the contents of these bills, they are regulations for closing loopholes in institutions like education, healthcare, usually for minors, and sports, which people never previously thought will be necessary to address. The fact that the president himself had to make a bill confirming that there are only two sexes shows how absurd and out of hand this whole situation got. The trans activists were used to some privileges which they only had because nearly no one knew they existed. So they slipped through the cracks, but now they are put in the spotlight and they are treated like everybody else. And they act as if that's a great injustice and genocide against them. No! That's not what's happening. You just decided to grant yourself some privileges which no one ever had before you, and now you're throwing a temper tantrum when they are taken away from you and you're treated like everybody else. If you remember what I said earlier in the series, I told you that leftists are usually more guilty of what they're accusing the right of than the right is. Well, in this case, the left came up with the concept of for the privileged equality feels like oppression, and now rather than being in a position to critique such an attitude, they most embody it.
We're just talking about a trans person, a person who has, at some point in their life, decided that the thing the doctor said they were is not the thing that they are.
You have to love how trusting the experts suddenly doesn't matter when feelings are in the way. Every time I see one of these pieces of legislation fear-mongered by the activists and I read it, it's something completely innocuous. In fact, many times, the reaction they're causing is, why are you afraid this is a good thing? Take this one for example. It's a prevention against fraud. Don't lie on your documents, which of course needs you to not lie to yourself in your own head. And this legislation will never affect you. People defending themselves from your aggression does not mean you're being victimized. And you know what? You didn't even need to consider these privileges as crucial to your identity anyhow. Look at this.
Lol, I've never changed my name or gender marker. I've literally always gone by. The government doesn't validate my existence. I'm actually the same. I haven't had a GRC or anything. And I mean, I'm not fussed about being legally recognized as a woman. I don't give a shit about that. I'm me regardless. I cannot be genocided because I am me regardless. You want me to officially call myself a man when I'm male anyway, when I'm a man anyway? Then I'll do that. I don't give a fuck. You cannot genocide me.
All right, Otaku, do you have a plan for that?
You're taking that seriously. Why aren't you saying no? That's going too far. Why aren't you saying, I don't think that's actually going to happen? Why are none of us, like, reassuring each other? Why don't we reassure each other? Hey, things aren't going to be ideal. There might be certain privileges that there might be certain previously held privileges that you are now going to lose again. But you're not going to die. You're okay. You just got to
Focus on the things you love. You got to focus on making sure that you're okay. Focus on your own survival and not drive yourself insane over this shit. But no, we're like, oh, the trains are going to come to take us to a concentration camp. We're not living in Nazi Germany. Sorry, you're not living in Nazi Germany. I'm not in America. Although I live on Turf Island, so apparently the trains were meant to come for me a long time ago. Weirdly, despite having been out trans for almost a decade, I don't feel oppressed. I don't actually think that I'm going to get killed by my own government because I'm trans. It's ridiculous. You people have lost your minds.
I am not an expert on everything that happened in 1930s and
You're not an expert. Just say it's not the same thing. Why you got to play this, like, even this amount of, like, credence to this kind of shit? Why? It's not happening. This isn't the same situation. Trans people in America are not the next people to be f***ing holocausted. You know this, but you can't say that because you need to keep some level of fear. You need to keep some level of, well, bad things are happening, you should be afraid. It's pathetic. You can't even deal with someone one-guying you in the most pathetic way possible, properly. It's so sad. And you get f***ing views for this shit. Why? Who watches this shit? I beg you, please tell me. Someone who watches this utter moron. Tell me what you see in him. I'd love to know. What about Russia in the 30s? They're all Marxists, where Stalinism came from, and they killed millions. The Russians don't count. Like, any violence that the communists did doesn't count because reasons. There's reasons, and there are many, okay? Many reasons why we're always talking about Nazi Germany in particular, and not talking about anything that any communists have done. It's because of reasons, and there's lots of them. That's why.
Phobia against them is usually a form of "this doesn't make any sense" and "don't force me to accept it." Meanwhile, the activists react with "they're coming to get you." If I were to place a bet, the average trans ally, especially the kind which contributes to online discourse, has added more to the demoralization, hopelessness, and worse among the trans community than the average transphobe.
Any argument that we are not in stage 3 is 100% incorrect.
People noticing they're being encroached on, pointing that out, and preventing you from doing it to them is not an attack on you. For the love of any standard at all, understand that it's defense from you. Noticing a problem is not a problem. Causing it is.
Any argument whatsoever, that none of this points to an attempt at dehumanizing trans people would in the same breath never want any of this to happen to their child.
Let's take that and do away with the euphemisms. If my child began to believe that his or her body is wrong to such a degree that it deserved to be destroyed, then surgically reconstructed, all the while because of that intervention my child would become a lifelong dependent on drugs that one's own body could not produce anymore. And before any of that happens, some group would stop my child from doing that and find a way to provide reassurance that everything is okay, and return to a more stable psychological state which I did not notice was deteriorating or was incapable of correcting, I would thank them.
What did I say when I began this video? What did I argue in the beginning of this video? If you wanted to enact a genocide in the modern day with all of the surveillance we have, all the documentation, all the news organizations, all of the independent media, everything, how would you do that? Very simple. You would make it invisible.
Incredible. He's using the fact that there isn't any evidence of it as evidence of it happening because we live in the present. When I told you that their beliefs are nothing but a psyop, did you believe me? Do you believe me now? These activists have invented categories in order to feel victimized if you don't affirm what they say.
I am a 400-foot-tall purple platypus bear with pink horns and silver wings.
Then with this victimization, what do they justify to themselves? How do they feel entitled to treat you? What is the kind of person who insists that opposition against them is completely groundless and unprovoked? Well, it's this.
If I go to the gym with Saki and somebody tries to order that she goes into the men's restroom, I will cave in the person's skull.
Now, grab a pen and a pad and write this down. Okay? I'm going to give you the number to Luigi Mangione's lawyer. You do whatever you feel creative. Use your creativity on what to do with that.
People who voted for Donald Trump fall in 4 categories. This is a hard science. I do not make the rules. And these categories are not mutually exclusive. There's a lot of overlap. And these categories are not unique to Trump supporters. Number 1, an ignorant person. Number 2 is going to be a stupid person. Number 3 is going to be your dishonest actor. Number 4 is going to be your genuinely hateful person. They don't care because it's all out of both malice and self-interest. Those are your 4 people. If you voted for Donald Trump, you fall in at least one of those categories. It's a hard science.
Because if it has nothing to do with procreation, then I don't see any reason why there would be a problem. For example, if someone was to come along and say they believe a man should be able to marry his sex doll or a man should be able to marry his pet.
You're the stupidest person we talked to today.
Name, age, and pronouns.
Jasmine, I am 32 and I do not have pronouns.
Do you want to say that last sentence again?
Oh, I said I do not have pronouns.
Oh, you clearly do, because I is a pronoun and you used I to describe yourself.
Are we real? Like, are we seriously pretending that this is cool? This is what people want? First off, why the f do you need to know someone's pronouns that you're talking to?
Oh, sure.
Cool. Chat, this is Jasmine. I is going to talk to me. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, like he's such a dick, like from the off. People trying to convince me, oh, well, he was trying to be good faith until 1 minute something in. And I'm like, oh, okay, so basically the start of the debate is when he stopped being good faith, mate.
Starts a very public pressure campaign on these organizations to do the right thing for women and for girls across the country.
There's the scary rhetoric. The do the right thing rhetoric. So, any language that argues that you can do this, you're doing the right thing, you're doing the right thing, you're on the right side of history, don't you want to be on the right side of history? When you engage in that kind of rhetoric, it is almost always because you are trying to convince somebody to do something that is against their moral standards, but you want them to be convinced that they are on the right side of history in so doing it.
12 seconds later.
We should not accept that. As for the things you can do about this one, petitions are a really good thing here. Petitions are a very good thing here. If the President of the United States believes that social pressure is enough to force the Olympics to do the wrong thing, then perhaps enough of us can engage in social pressure to get them to do the right thing.
Well, I was going to say, it's not irony, it's hypocrisy, and it's not hypocrisy, it's hierarchy. And it's not just, a lack of self-awareness, it's straight up deception. They know they're lying, but they're allowed to lie to you because they are above you in the hierarchy. They just don't call it lying when they do it.
When a trans woman tells you, I'm having menstrual cramps.
No, you're not.
Do you understand?
That's what I say.
Huh?
They're not. That's just not happening.
Are you in their head? Are you in their body?
Well, I care about the truth, and trans women can't menstruate because they don't have vaginas, ovaries, They
can have fluctuating hormones, just like what happens in somebody in somebody who does have a uterus.
So I guess
they get cramps and mood swings.
Yeah, but that's not menstruation.
It's not menstruation technically, but like you're nitpicking here. It's just like, why do you care?
Why do I have to?
There are some similarities. There's some similarities.
Why do I have to justify why I care about something? I'm literally trans,
because it seems like you're just doing this out of bad faith to be a piece of shit. Like why else would you do it?
Getting Jacob that we've had this discussion before, and I didn't want to pick up where we left off. I wanted to start fresh, but it feels like it's hard for me to believe you're intellectually honest because we've had this exact
not intellectually honest because oh hey Olivia, I didn't see you. Not intellectually honest because we've had this discussion previously, and you haven't changed your views to my views. That's what she's saying.
Discussion before, and we've gotten exactly here before.
You do that. You're quite mean to other people, though. So is that? Would you?
I'm perfectly fine being mean to dipshits like you. That's fine.
Okay. I think I've been quite nice to you, but
I don't care. you're wrong, and you refuse to accept that you're wrong.
And deliberately under attack. J.K. Rowling is actively attacking transgender people. She has supported the culture that has led to the further and further institutionalization.
Institutionalization? What was that?
She has supported the culture that has led to the further and further institutionalization.
What is that? What are you even saying? Oh my god. Oh no, not the institutionalization of trans people. Oh man, you're killing me. You're killing me.
Of transphobia that is directly attacked.
I disagree. This sounds like someone who's been very, very recently punched in the face. Oh my god, is this a Freudian slip? Is it your tongue trying to stop you from lying the way you are?
The vast majority of opposition to progressive causes is not based on preconceptions. It's based on experience with progressives. This is where the state wants the left to be because it contributes to anarcho-tyranny, just like how some more violent aspects of the right are promoted for the same purpose. The only difference is that right-wing movements have noticed this and are fighting against it because they see it rightfully as coming from feds. The right has other problems of aimlessness and of the fact that the right-wing cause is difficult to build. The aimlessness I intend to help in solving with releasing in the near future some videos about the motivations of the right, with one underlying principle which then branches into 5 pillars of the right which derive from it. You will see that soon. Now, if you didn't believe me when I told you that every aspect of the left is part of the problem, I have more of that in my series Lessons in Political Maturity, episode 1, The Left's Learning Problem, where I analyze every leftist goal and initiative, what it set out to do, what it believes about itself, and the actions promoted in the name of leftism, which leftists would rather brush over or forget about. Currently I released 3 videos in that series, but they're not very popular, so I'm focusing first on videos which are more likely to be popular. Videos with more clickbait, videos about current events and how they show things the right knew were true for years or decades, and videos on media, 2 of which are coming really soon. If you want me to release more of Lessons in Political Maturity 1, incentivize me to do it. Let's say get this 3-part mini-series to at least 50 likes, 2000 views and 100 watch hours for each video, which is under my record, but still a good performance. Part 1 is already above that level. And get the videos in that series to 1000 views each, which is about triple of what they have. And after I release my videos on the motivations of the right, then we're talking. Also, if you want more ways to support me, there's also my Entropy, and you can like the videos, share and subscribe, and I don't believe I can open a subscribe star until I prove I bring some level of a paying audience. I will announce my exclusive videos when I come up with them. Hopefully at this part in the video I have convinced you that both democracy and leftism are not solutions to our current political problems and our current loss of freedoms, the general worsening of our economy, social polarization and other similar problems. In fact, through tools unique to each one, they contribute to these problems. Now the aim with my video is to have it under or very close to 1 hour, so I will present part of the solution here and part of the solution in my exclusive video, code E1, through which you can contribute on Entropy. I do not believe that in electoral politics there are any parties which are truly trustworthy, because they all affirm democracy. The only trustworthy party would be a party with 2 main goals. First of all, documenting the corruption of every other party and the ways in which policies were suggested, but they did not help, were pushed despite the protests of the population, or were meant purely for gathering more power. And the second goal of such a trustworthy party would be the re-establishment of a monarchic system. If you will return to this channel in a couple of months, I will have released a couple of videos on monarchy and why it's a better system of solving these problems than democracy ever could be. What this exclusive E1 video will have are reasons why the current monarchies do not contribute to reversing these problems. I will begin working on the E1 video after receiving 10 different $10 donors on Entropy. These trustworthy parties will be part of the solution on a large scale. On a small scale, the one which you can contribute to, just distance yourself from everything leftist. And again, the E1 video will have some tools to help you in doing that. Now, since this video and this series is rather long, I believe it's good time to make a summary to see what we've accomplished and what is coming up next. In this Lessons in Political Maturity Specials 1, Part 1 consisted of going over 5 democratic events that point towards the fact that one side is supposed to win, with the different techniques about it and how ominous each event was. And I presented the beginning of how activists are clueless about their own causes and they are easy to manipulate. In part 2, we went over the techniques used in democracy to prevent change and containment, and continued with the activist actions while we were gearing up to see how the left is the enforcer of the status quo. In part 3, I introduced Anarcho-Tyranny, discussed more about containment and why the left cannot be the solution to our political problems, plus which kind of parties are trustworthy. Part 4, which will be the exclusive E1, which you can get access to on Entropy for $5, and I will release it after it's unlocked at the $100 mark. This video will contain conclusions on why the left cannot be our solution, how to address leftists if you absolutely must, a couple of things about their movement which they really don't want you to find about, and are severely under-discussed mainly because of how ironic they are, together with why the right is stunned by the democratic process and what to do to get unstuck. And in part 5 we go over how to establish a monarchy in the present from a republic. Now, if everything goes right, I will have a new video on media on the 19th of March, after which I can release the E1 video when there are enough supporters, and soon after that I will release my video on how to turn a republic into a monarchy. Then I will wrap up some parts 2 of the videos I have released already, and the channel will be finally ready for the video on the motivations of the right. So until all that happens, I wish you have a nice week, and I leave you with the motto of Lessons in Political Maturity.
Fight for our children! Our children's children, so they will not carry these marks!